Somewhere right now, someone is checking their horoscope before they check the weather. Somewhere else, someone just spent 20 minutes screaming at a referee on a screen like the outcome of a football game was a matter of justice. Somewhere else, someone is scrolling through a thread, completely convinced they've found the real reason the world is the way it is. And somewhere else, a church is sitting half empty on a Sunday morning, the way it has been for years now. We've been told a story about that last one. The story goes like this. People are finally growing out of belief, outgrowing God, outgrowing superstition, outgrowing the need for something bigger than themselves to explain the world. Back in 2007, 16% of American adults said they had no religion at all. Today, it's 29%, almost double, in less than 20 years. By that math, we should be the most rational generation that's ever lived. Here's the problem. Most of those people never actually stopped believing in something. Pew Research asked them directly, and almost half of them still said they believe in God. Most still think there's something spiritual going on underneath the surface of things. They didn't lose the belief. They just moved out of the building it used to live in. So if it's not really about religion, what is it actually about? This isn't a video about whether God is real. It's about something underneath that question, a piece of machinery in your brain that's been running since long before any religion existed, and it's still running right now, today, whether or not you'd ever call yourself a believer in anything. There are three things driving it. One is a fear you weren't built to sit with for very long. One is a problem your species couldn't solve any other way. And one is a hunger for a story, basically any story, strong enough to survive a universe that doesn't actually owe you a reason for anything. And by the end of this, you're going to recognize this exact mechanism running in your own life, in places you would never have thought to call faith. Let's start with the fear. In 1973, an anthropologist named Ernest Becker wrote a book called The Denial of Death. His argument was simple and a little brutal. Human beings are the only animal that knows, with total certainty, that it's going to die, and that knowledge is too heavy to carry around all day, every day, for an entire life. So we build things to carry it for us instead. Religions, nations, legacies, causes, any structure that tells us our life means something that outlasts our body. A decade later, a group of psychologists decided to actually test that idea instead of just writing about it. They called it terror management theory, and the first real experiment built around it is one of the strangest, quietly most disturbing studies in social psychology. In 1989, researchers brought in actual municipal court judges, real cases. Before the experiment started, half of them were handed a short questionnaire and asked to write a few sentences about their own death, just a couple of lines, how it might happen, how it would feel. Then every judge read the same case file, a woman charged with prostitution and was asked to set her bail. The judges who hadn't been asked to think about death set the bail at an average of $50, standard, unremarkable, exactly what you'd expect for that charge. The judges who'd spent 2 minutes writing about their own mortality set it at an average of $455, 9 times higher, from sitting judges, over a 2-minute writing prompt about dying. Here's what should actually bother you about that. None of those judges felt like anything had changed in them. When researchers asked afterward, every one of them insisted that thinking about death had nothing to do with how they ruled. They were wrong, and the data says they were wrong by a factor of 9. So here's the mechanism underneath it. The moment your brain gets close to the idea that you're going to die, it doesn't make you calmer or more rational. It makes you cling harder to whatever tells you the world has order and meaning and rules worth defending. And it makes you come down harder on anyone who looks like they're breaking those rules. Believing in something bigger than yourself isn't a side effect of being human. It might be one of the only things standing between you and a very specific kind of panic you were never built to hold for long. But that's only the first engine, and it doesn't explain everything. If belief was purely about managing your own private fear of death, it wouldn't need to be shared with anyone. You could believe whatever quiet thing got you through the night and keep it to yourself. Instead, belief has always shown up in groups, with rules, with other people watching. So here's the second piece. For most of human history, you lived in a group of around 150 people, give or take, small enough that everyone knew everyone. If you cheated someone or broke a promise, the whole camp knew about it by sundown. You didn't need a god watching you. You had 150 actual people watching you all the time. Then villages turned into towns, and towns turned into cities, and for the first time in the history of our species, you could meet a complete stranger, do business with them, and never see them again. That's a real problem. If you're trying to build something bigger than a tribe, how do you trust someone you might disappear on forever, and who might disappear on you? A psychologist named Ara Norenzayan spent years on exactly this question, and in 2013, he published an answer that reshaped how a lot of researchers think about where religion actually came from. His argument was that the gods got bigger at almost the exact same moment human societies got bigger. And that's not a coincidence. Small bands had small local spirits who mostly minded their own business. Large civilizations developed something different, an all-seeing, all-knowing God who watches everyone, everywhere, even the stranger you'll never meet again, and keeps score, which means religion was never really sold first on the next life. First, it was a trust machine, a way to make a complete stranger behave like someone was watching, even when no one actually was. Believing in a watching God is part of what let cities exist at all. It let trade happen between people who'd never met. It let civilizations scale past the size where everybody simply knows, personally, whether you're a liar. So you've got fear and you've got trust. There's a third piece though, and it's the one quietly running underneath almost everything you think. Your brain did not evolve to handle randomness well. Picture an early human standing in tall grass, hearing a rustle nearby. There are two ways to be wrong here. You can assume it's the wind, and it turns out to be a leopard, and you're dead. Or you can assume it's a leopard, and it turns out to be the wind, and you just look a little jumpy for a second. One of those mistakes costs you your life. The other one costs you nothing. So evolution built you to make the second mistake constantly. You are descended, generation after generation, from the ones who saw intention and danger everywhere, even when it wasn't actually there. That wiring doesn't switch off just because you live in an apartment now instead of on a savanna. It's the same wiring that makes you see a face in a power outlet, or assume someone did that on purpose when it was really just bad luck, or refuse to accept that a tragedy simply had no reason behind it. Your brain isn't built to sit with the idea that something just happened for no reason. It's built to find a story behind it, especially when there isn't one to find. This is also where meaning stops being a nice extra and starts looking more like load-bearing structure. Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist who survived Auschwitz, and afterward he wrote about something he'd noticed there. The people who held on to some reason to keep going, even something small, a person they wanted to see again, a piece of work they hadn't finished, seemed to endure what should have been unendurable in a different way than the people who didn't have one. He never claimed meaning could undo suffering. He claimed it changed what the suffering did to you on the way through. So that's the third engine, not just a fear of death, and not just trust between strangers, but a brain that genuinely cannot rest until chaos gets turned into a story it can live inside. Now, go back to that statistic from the start of this video. Religion is emptying out. The need underneath it isn't. Pew's own data backs this up directly. Among Americans who say they have no religion at all, nearly half still say they believe in God. Most say they don't need religion to feel spiritual. They just don't need the building for it anymore. The belief didn't leave. It stopped paying rent at the church and went looking for a new address. One of the places it moved into is, a little strangely, astrology. The global astrology market is sitting somewhere around $12.8 billion, with projections putting it close to $23 billion by 2031. An app called CoStar has tens of millions of people checking their charts the way you check a weather app. Survey after survey on Gen Z and young millennials keeps finding a striking share of them say they consult astrology before big life decisions, jobs, relationships, moves, during exactly the years when the economy stopped making sense to them and the institutions around them stopped feeling trustworthy. When the world gets too chaotic to predict, people don't stop looking for a pattern, they just go find a new one. Another place it moved is conspiracy theories, which is really the darker twin of that same agency detection wiring from a minute ago. A pandemic, a recession, a tragedy with no clean villain attached to it. These are exactly the kinds of events your brain refuses to file away as random. One recent EU-wide survey found that more than a quarter of Europeans believe some viruses were deliberately engineered in a lab. A hidden hand behind the chaos, even a frightening one, is somehow easier to live with than the idea that there's no hand at all. And a third place it moved is somewhere you'd probably never call religious in a million years. A sports fandom, a political side, an online community built around a shared enemy, jerseys instead of robes, chants instead of hymns, a clean sense of who's in and who's a heretic. You don't need a church for any of that. You just need the same three engines: fear, belonging, meaning, and something willing to absorb them. Take away the building, and the need doesn't go anywhere. It just goes looking for a new one. Here's where it gets genuinely strange though, because all of this leads to an uncomfortable question. If belief was never really about being correct in the first place, what happens when the thing you believed in gets proven wrong, right in front of you? In 1954, a small group formed in the Midwest around a woman the records call Dorothy Martin, who said she'd received messages warning her that a massive flood was about to destroy the world. Her followers quit jobs. Some sold their homes. They genuinely believed it. A psychologist named Leon Festinger heard about the group and did something unusual. He and his team joined, undercover, specifically to watch what happened on the night the world was supposed to end. The date arrived. Midnight came and went. Nothing happened. You'd think that would be the end of it. Direct, undeniable proof that the belief was false, delivered at the exact moment it was supposed to be tested. Instead, a member of the group announced that a new message had come through. Their faith had been so strong that it had saved the entire planet. And here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. The members who'd already given up the most for that belief, the ones who'd quit jobs, sold belongings, burned bridges with family who already thought they were crazy, didn't quietly walk away embarrassed. They believed harder. They started recruiting more aggressively than before. Festinger called what he saw cognitive dissonance, and the lesson buried inside it is bigger than one strange group from 1954. If a belief was never really being tested against evidence in the first place, if what it was actually doing was managing a fear of death, or anchoring someone to a tribe, or turning unbearable chaos into a story, then proving it false on paper doesn't remove the thing it was doing for the person holding it. The need just survives the failure and finds a way to keep the belief alive anyway. Which raises the question almost nobody wants to sit with. If belief was never really about being right, what happens when someone figures that out and starts building one on purpose? So here's where all three pieces land in the same place. Belief was never primarily a claim about reality. It's infrastructure. It's the thing standing between you and the fear of your own death. It's the thing that lets you trust a stranger you'll never see again. It's the thing that takes a random, indifferent universe and hands you back a story you can actually live inside. Which means, is this true, might genuinely be the wrong first question to ask about why someone believes something. The better question is what fear it's quieting, what tribe it's anchoring them to, or what unbearable randomness it's turning into a story for them. Ask that about astrology. Ask it about a conspiracy theory, a political movement, a religion. You'll usually get a more honest answer than, is it true? None of this is a case for believing whatever happens to be loudest, though. Frankl's point cuts the other way, too. The need for meaning isn't embarrassing, and it isn't something you're supposed to grow out of. It's structural. Take it away completely, with nothing put in its place, and people don't quietly turn into calm rationalists. The mice in Universe 25 didn't get calmer when their world stopped making sense either. They just fell apart in different, uglier ways. So the real choice was never whether to believe in something. You don't get to opt out of that one. The architecture's already installed. The only real choice left is whether you pick what fills it on purpose, or whether you let it get filled by whatever happens to be loudest, angriest, or most convenient on the day you stopped paying attention. Go back to the start of this for a second. 16% with no religion in 2007, 29% today. We told ourselves that number meant we were finally outgrowing belief. We didn't outgrow it. We just stopped noticing all the places it quietly moved into instead. The question was never really whether you believe in something. Everyone does, whether they'd use that word for it or not. The actual question, the one worth sitting with after this video ends, is whether you actually know what you're kneeling to.